Welcome to the Real View podcast, where Ohio Realtors connect you to innovators and influencers, keeping you with the real view of real estate. Whether you're a broker, agent, first-time homebuyer, industry leader, or just happen to stumble upon our podcast today, you can expect to hear tips, tools, tricks, interesting information, and so much more from the experts in Ohio's real estate game.
Hello, everyone. Happy New Year, and welcome back to another episode of Ohio Policy Talk. I'm your host, Anastasia, here with my co-host, Andrew Huffman, and today we're excited to be joined by a familiar face in Ohio Realtors advocacy space. Our guest today is Michael Jones, who will be serving as the 2026 chair of Ohio Realtors Legislative Steering Committee. Michael is a member of Columbus Realtors and has been quite involved in advocacy at both the state and federal levels, and he has spent years helping advance realtor issues. Michael, welcome to the show. We're so glad to have you here.
Thank you so much, Anastasia, for the invitation and the opportunity to sit down with you and Andrew and kind of talk about where Ohio is with its legislative agenda.
Absolutely. So for listeners who may not know you yet, can you introduce yourself and share a bit about your background in real estate and advocacy?
Sure. Thank you for the opportunity to do that. Again, my name is Michael Jones. I have been a real estate agent for just over 30 years at this point, have enjoyed the majority of my career tenure as a residential realtor, and over the past several years have began to flip that a little bit and focus quite a bit more on the commercial space and commercial transactions. And it's like an opportunity to reinvent myself after 30 years. Usually people just retire, but we know in our industry, people don't do that. It's an opportunity for me now to do business a little bit differently and be in the commercial space a little bit more and enjoy that different opportunity to serve our buyers and sellers and clients. So I have been immersed in the political landscape, both, as you mentioned, federally, serving as a federal political coordinator to Joyce Beatty. I refer to it as her real estate policy advisor. That's been a great time. I've been with her since she has started in Congress, have also worked with some of her colleagues in an effort to advance legislation and support the issues that are important to realtors. And even on a more local level, working now a little bit with you and Andrew and the rest of the team, working in the State House with people that I know, good friends, people that understand the importance of housing matters. So it's just been a great time, and especially as a 30 plus year veteran, to be able to sit back and be able to participate a little bit differently. So I really enjoy that.
Well, Michael, we certainly appreciate your involvement. I think when I first met you, it was through your role as a federal political coordinator for Congresswoman Beatty, and no one runs a DC meeting as well as you and Congresswoman Beatty. You just do an amazing job. I love attending that meeting with you all. And I also just have learned to appreciate your involvement in the Central Ohio community, specifically on the legislative front. You seem to know a lot of politicians, and that doesn't happen overnight. That takes effort and time and commitment, and you seem to value that more than many. Can you talk about how you got your start in the political world and why you think it's so important to Ohio Realtors?
Well, I don't know that I can really pinpoint a starting point. It's more like an organic approach. You know, when you're around like-minded people, you surround yourself with people with similar interests. It just kind of organically becomes a friendship or relationship. And as they say, birds of a feather flock together. You know, it just kind of becomes an organic, and I use that word because it's a very natural. There was nothing intentional for me to say, hey, I want to be placed in the Columbus, political landscape or scene. And what do I need to do that? Everything just kind of happened organically. And I think the relationships continue to develop further in a very organic way. When you meet people where they are, it goes a very long way. When you come only with an agenda and always an ask, it's a little bit different. And I don't have that kind of relationship with the majority of folks that we deal with.
I'm so glad that you said that, because we tell our state political coordinators and our FPCs, you don't want your first meeting or your first conversation to be an ask. You want to build that relationship, like you said, organically, and then making that ask becomes a lot easier when you have built that relationship. So thank you for throwing that in there as well.
For sure, for sure.
And I think I think it's such a unique position to be an FPC or an SPC because, you are the boots in the ground realtor experiencing the world every single day. And so the decisions that they make at the state house or at the federal level directly impact you and your business. So that education point where you go to lawmakers and say, hey, this is how, your actions can affect me. And also building those relationships over time, like Andrew said, so important. So it's a very unique and wonderful position that you have been able to have. But getting back to legislative steering, you've been on the committee for some time now. What kind of led you to get involved in that? And what has kind of led to you getting into this chair role?
Well, I think that as we talk about this being my approach being very organic, I think it's just what I'm drawn to: solving, legislative, creative. All these things are characteristics that help, I think, make this an organic fit for me. So it's just when you serve, and I think it's incredibly important to be able to serve in our industry, and I'm grateful for the opportunity to do that. It's incredibly important that we serve, number one, but it's so much better if you serve in a space that's natural, right? You don't feel like you have to do it. And they have the saying, if you enjoy what you do, you never work a day in your life. So it's kind of the same concept. If you get involved and you're engaged in committees or whatever your role may be, if it's an organic approach, if it's natural for you, if it's second nature, it's super easy. And so for me, again, with my personality, with my whatever characteristics I may have, they just lead me to being in this legislative space in addition to other leadership roles within the association. So I really appreciate being able to even recognize that, because that's the other piece. People oftentimes struggle with, where do I go? What do I do? And when you can simply be still for just a moment and see, where do I fit? And you kind of ask yourself that, and you let yourself find where you fit rather than being placed somewhere. I think that makes a big difference too.
Well, and I like the fact that you also served on the local government forum and you got that experience before you jumped into the vice chair role and now before you're jumping into the chair role. And let's talk about the Legislative Steering Committee and what it is and what it does. Certainly Anastasia and I are biased because that's one of our main committees that we get to work on. But for you as a member, what do you see the role as the Legislative Steering Committee? And I specifically for you, Michael, you played such a huge role in coming up with our most recent strategic plan as an association, and advocacy was so critical in that strategic plan. I mean, how do you see legislative steering playing into that?
Well, I mean, as you had mentioned, advocacy is one of our paramount goals and missions, as part of our mission. Legislative steering, to answer your first question, I feel as though you guys do such an amazing job. Your boots on the ground, ears to the ground, learning what's happening in the state house, being able to bring it to us. So it's a two-way street. You do that, you bring information to us, and in addition to bringing it to us, what we do is hear what you've learned not only from the legislator, but maybe even industry wide, whether it's the Land Title Association, Bankers Association. You get us the opinion, which is, it's important, I think, to understand where our counterparts in the industry stand, and so we can better position ourselves. But what you do is, you and Anastasia and the rest of the team do all of that groundwork, that legwork for us, and then you bring it back so that we can be better informed to make better decisions on how we want to move with proposed legislation. So I think, again, we're going into a unique year. We're in a unique state of affairs, I'll say, for lack of a better term, both federally, statewide, and locally. So we don't know really what's coming. We can look at historically what we've seen, but we have no idea what's coming down the pike. And I'm saying we need to put on battle gear, because I expect whatever it is will not be calm. It will not be easy. And that's why it's so important that, again, out serving on the Legislative Steering Committee, we have good information from you, both from legislators. We understand what their mindsets are with proposing this legislation, whatever it may be, and then being able to decipher among ourselves as we sit and deliberate. I really appreciate how my counterparts or colleagues on the committee are able to offer these varying opinions and perspectives. it is really good for me in helping to think beyond what my mind may be able to come up with. So it's really the collaboration that takes place when we do sit down to deliberate, I think is really, really good. And we all, since I've served, we land on the same decision. So we're able to give you that kind of feedback, give you good direction on where we'd like to see us, where we'd like to go. And then you can then take the message and move with it from that point. So I love that in the process that we're able to go through.
Well, and I'm glad that you said that, because it's not just like it's the three of us sitting in a room coming up with our legislative priorities. We do have a process in place. When legislation is introduced, we bring it before the Legislative Steering Committee, and it is a group discussion. It is a group decision on whether we oppose or support it. And then that has to go to the Executive Committee. So we aren't just making this up off the cuff. It is a thorough discussion. I know last year, there's some issues that we talked about at our very first meeting, and we still had not taken a decision by the end of the year, just because there's so much that goes in to this legislation and getting all the feedback that we need to make an informed decision.
Yeah, our group is very thoughtful and deliberate, I think, and they've been chosen well. And you bring up a point that I'd like to highlight, because we got this is open to the entire membership. And I think that one thing that some of them might believe, is that these decisions are made in a vacuum. And while decisions may be made by a smaller segment of our realtor family, we need input from everybody. We need everybody to be informed and aware and able to bring that level of communication back to you and your team, so that we can hear about how things are affecting our members, so that we have, on a larger scale, the entire state weighing in, so that we as the smaller group have that information while we deliberate.
I'm really glad that we can share this with our listeners, because, like you said, to your point, these decisions aren't made in a vacuum. It's not made behind a closed door. We have very extensive discussion, debate, member input that goes into every decision that we make. And it's very, very member driven. So, and speaking of positions, I know, Michael, you said we're in a very interesting state of affairs. And looking ahead to 2026, and Andrew, you can jump in here as well. What are kind of the major legislative issues that realtors should be paying attention to? What's kind of on the horizon?
Andrew, if you want to take this first.
Yeah, I'll dive into it. We're in the second year of the 2-year legislative cycle. So in 2025, we're able to address some of the higher profile bills, things like real estate wholesaling and property taxes. 2026, it's an election year, so much of the focus will be on the election, but legislation still gets done. I mentioned property taxes. We still have about 24 property tax reform bills out there. We had the sponsor of many of those bills over at the office this week, and he is still fired up. He still wants to provide more property tax relief to Ohioans. So I would expect and anticipate more property tax legislation to be passed by the end of the year. There's also legislation that restricts foreign land purchases, which may sound like a good idea. We certainly don't want our enemies buying large portions of land in Ohio, but there's unintended consequences when you tell folks who may be here legally that they cannot purchase a home. The legislature is also reviewing the licensing requirements for home inspectors. That's a license that we as an association helped create about 8 years ago, and we want to make sure that we have the best and most qualified home inspectors in the nation, and that comes through the educational requirements of a license. There's also more and more local governments banning and restricting short-term rentals. We view that as a private property right infringement, and we want to protect those property owners from a local government coming in and pulling the rug out from under them. So that's something that we've worked on at the national level. We've heard a lot of talk recently about institutional investors and their role in the housing market, and what can and cannot be done to maybe restrict their impact. So I imagine when things happen at the federal level or are said at the federal level, they have a tendency to trickle down into the state level. So I expect more and more talk about institutional investors. And then a newer issue, although it has been around for a while, is deed fraud. We are seeing more and more cases of deed fraud throughout the nation, not just in Ohio. But this is something that I think as an association, we need to do everything we can to protect consumers and homeowners. And this deed fraud is it's a horrible situation. The Division of Real Estate issued some guidance to our members last year, but I think something needs to be done to not only inform our members, but also just protect the public from this deed fraud. So that's something that I would expect get some attention this year as well.
That sounds great. I'm looking forward to doing that with you as much as I can. What do I see? Let me start at the top. I see, from a federal position, I see an administration that has been very aggressive so far, and I see them ramping that up, frankly. And in that process, I would expect that there will be some bowing out, some, how would I say, at the federal level from a legislative standpoint, I'm going to see maybe not the automatic stamps, if you will, on legislation. I'm going to see some people concerned about their pending election, and decisions that they may want to make, and that will trickle down to the state. I think there will be pressure put on them as well. I'm going to look at this year as an opportunity to be offensive. Oftentimes in our roles, we are very defensive with our approach. You've been very good at getting us a seat at the table on a lot of things on the front end, which is awesome. But maybe if we were to sit down, and we should do this, look at things that are impacting our members, look at things that are impacting the industry, and see how we can, maybe take an opportunity to present some legislation or present some things to some legislators to develop some legislation from that. I think I'd like to see that in this year, and I'm going to claim it and declare it. I'd like to see us be a little bit more offensive with our approach. And when I say offensive, really not to use, a sports term, but tactical and proactive is probably the best way to put it. So I'm looking forward to that with all of you.
And I love what you said about, what can we do to make the real estate industry better and healthier and more robust? I love that. And that is the question we should be asking. And I know that we on the lobbying team are very much looking forward to, at the State House, working on some of the issues that Andrew mentioned. And like we mentioned earlier, the elections are coming up. So that'll be very interesting to watch. So we're excited to see how things play out with that. But finally, what advice would you want to give to realtors who want to become more involved in advocacy but are not sure where to start?
Let's have a conversation. This will be an open invitation. Anybody listening to this podcast, find me. Let's have a conversation. If you're not local, let's have a phone call. If you are local, let's sit down for coffee and chat. I think it boils down to understanding what you can do, how you can do it. But the first thing is you mentioned these people that want to get involved. That's the first step. I think that we operate as business owners, and far too often, I think we don't recognize and treat it as such. We are business owners, and we need to operate businesses, in a certain way. Being a part of legislative and advocacy is actually just an investment. It's an investment. It's buy-in. It's about understanding your craft and what you do, and having an active role in participating in how it pans out, how it plays out. So I think it's really important for everybody to have some role in advocacy. Certainly, if it's nothing more than voting. I'm sure we have members that have not found it as critical to vote, but it's just important to get out and vote. But secondarily, to step that up, being involved, be able to give your input on these legislative matters that come before us at Ohio REALTORS, stepping up, even if you want to be an investor in RPAC. There's so many ways for people to get involved, and oftentimes people don't because fear of what they don't know or understand. And so again, I extend the invitation to any and all. Let's have a conversation. I am happy to engage and share with you what I can and do anything I can to be helpful.
Well, and I'll make a plug for Realtors at the Rotunda, which is taking place on March 13th. That's a great way for folks who may not serve on legislative steering or may not be an SPC or an FPC, but it's a great way to get involved in the legislative process. We take about 400 realtors and we essentially take over the State House. We have a brunch in the atrium, and then we have speakers in the afternoon. And last year we had the governor come and give a presentation, and it really is a great event. It's grown year after year, and I think that's an excellent way to get involved. I'll give Anastasia a lot of credit. We have really enhanced our communication over the years. We have a Capital Connections, which is a one time a month publication that highlights local, state, and federal advocacy efforts. We also have a buzz series. So anytime we testify in legislation or something is moving at the State House, we put it on our website. So stay tuned to all the updates. And I really do love the stories of we'll just have a member who cares about an issue and they'll come in and testify on it and they fall in love with the legislative process. We had one with the real estate wholesaling bill. He had mentioned something to me, I think at Winter Conference, never got involved in politics. And now he's serving on legislative steering. He testified multiple times. So those are the best stories to me. You see them have no idea to get involved in politics. And before you know it, they're testifying before a committee and serving on a committee. It really is great.
That's awesome.
And I will definitely include in the show notes the link to Capital Connections. It really is kind of like a once a month update. What are we doing at the local, state, and federal levels for the month prior? What should be on your radar? Things to look out for. So I'll definitely put that in the show notes. And especially for members who, all of your advice was really great. Like for members who might not think that advocacy is accessible or think that maybe advocacy is intimidating. There's so many ways to get involved, and you definitely don't have to be, an expert to get started and to be an advocate. But Michael, thank you so much for joining us today. I think that's all the questions we have for you. And thanks for walking us through your experience and kind of what's ahead for Ohio Realtors this year. We're super excited to have you as the legislative steering chair. We know that there is some great work ahead of us. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Anastasia. Thank you, Andrew. Thank you for having me. And thank you for the work that you do for our association and for our industry. Truly appreciate it.
Oh, well, thank you. And to our listeners, thanks for tuning in. We'll include additional resources in the show notes if you'd like to learn more about our advocacy efforts, and we will see you next time.
Thank you for listening to The Real View. That wraps up today's episode. You can keep up with the latest on the podcast at ohiorealtors.org/therealview and on Apple or Google Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen. Have questions, comments, or suggestions? We want to hear from you. Email us at podcast@ohiorealtors.org. We'll see you next time.